Now you were saying that the arm over here,
the extended arm, yep.
The extended arm, in a way, is the next version of the.
Yeah, this was the year after the third hand, the extended arm, and if I come here, I can actually slip this on for you. What's interesting about this is not only is there an extra joint, because effectively, your arm is 3 joints ordinarily.
Yeah.
And this one adds a 4th joint, which is the wrist rotation. So it has a wrist rotation, thumb rotation, but each finger splits open.
Yeah.
So each finger becomes a gripper in itself. So you have finger flexion as well as each finger splitting open. So in this case, each finger potentially is a gripper in itself.
Yeah.
It's 11 degrees of freedom. The third hand is literally only a couple of degrees of freedom. This is 11 degrees of freedom. And it also extends your arm to primate proportions.
I was going to say, it actually looks a little bit ape-like.
And also with this performance, typically I would perform with my right arm extended to primate proportions, but my left arm to be computer controlled using a muscle stimulation system.
Yeah.
So voltage in, involuntary movements.
Yeah.
Voltage out, actuating the extended arm. So
is it pneumatic, by the way?
It's pneumatic.
Yeah.
And again, the reason for this is it's a sound machine. Not only do you have the mechanical clicks, but the pneumatic air sounds and the solenoid sounds as well, almost circadian sorts of sounds. So, and I performed with this for a number of years as well, as a kind of as an extension of a physical extension, rather than just simply adding a few functional capabilities, which was the case with the third hand.
And again, was that triggered by muscular signals?
No. This was, in a sense, you have to imagine this as a kind of on my right side was a pneumatically actuated a device, and this was, I'll just tighten this in a little more. My fingers rested on these switches here, and each switch was programmed with a certain combination of movements. So for example, switch 1 might have been wrist rotation, thumb rotation. Switch 2 might have been finger flexion. Switch 3 might have been finger splitting open, and so on. And so by literally playing the switches, I could generate the choreography of movements of the manipulator. But as a counterpoint to that, my right arm was computer controlled, computer programmed, sending 15 to 50 volts of electricity to my different muscle sites. So performing a choreography where flexor, extender, biceps and deltoid muscles were programmed.
And so from that, we then get I suppose we could think of it as a third iteration of the arm, which is the arm that you used with...
Yeah, this is a bit more difficult to pull out, and I'll just sort of lift it up.
Hmm.
I don't know if you...
Because this is supported, isn't it? When you do this as a performance, you've actually
this is
got it on a
because
hoist.
of the weight of it, and the weight is because of the bearings
Yeah.
that were incorporated in it, to allow for rotation.
Yeah.
So ordinarily, the weight of the arm, the exoskeleton arm, is counterbalanced by this device here, which is a kind of a spring-loaded device. So you basically adjust it to take the weight of the arm. So when you slip your arm into it, you're really not feeling any weight at all, literally.
Because how heavy is that? It looks like it'd be about 20...
no,
not
about
quite that?
12, 13 kilos,
Okay,
something
still
like that.
too much to...
It's too much to
Yeah.
hold. I mean, even 5 kilograms after 5 minutes would be burdensome. So, so for the Rewired Remix performance at the Perth Institute of Contemporary Art, where we use this exoskeleton arm for 5 days, 6 hours a day, I could only see with the eyes of someone in London. I could only hear with the ears of someone in New York, whilst anyone anywhere could access my exoskeleton arm and choreograph its movements. So effectively, your vision was disconnected from your hearing, and your arm effectively was disconnected from your body.
And hearing as well.
Yeah.
So the participant in London, for instance, whose eyes you were looking through, were they carrying some kind of small portable camera?
Yeah, for the performance at Pika, we used GoPros.
Yeah.
And so basically they had a GoPro strapped to their bodies, and for example, one day I was bicycling through London. I'm getting a first-person view, right? So one of the problems actually was maintaining your balance sometimes. Another day I visited my disembodied eyes were in the Tate Modern. On a double-decker bus.
While your ears are listening to a street in New York.
Yes, and interestingly, what you tended to do was your awareness kind of slipped between what you were hearing, what you were seeing. But for example, if something took my attention in the Tate Modern, I would tend to focus on that, and what you were hearing, kind of in terms of your awareness, tended to be backgrounded. But for example, one day I was on a bus. In London, double-decker bus in London, and then all of a sudden I realised my two friends were in a Chinese restaurant in New York. And Lauren was in my right ear because it was the sound was in stereo. Nina, his partner, was in my left ear. And then one of their friends was sitting between them, and I was getting this exchange as if I'm just sitting at the table, in a Chinese restaurant in New York. So sometimes, your attention was drawn to what you were hearing. Sometimes it was drawn to what you were seeing. But then every time someone actuated your arm and possibly sort of threw you off balance a little bit, then of course
you were distracted by the...
you were in a you were you were grounded. So there was this. The other issue here was too that although I was blind and sort of deaf to my local gallery space, so I couldn't see what was happening in the gallery space. I couldn't hear what was happening in the gallery space, but I could see what was happening in London. I could hear what was happening in New York.
Well, I've only recently, I think my first experience of VR, or even, just 360 video, was only about a year ago. And I was so enthralled by it that I spent hours and hours with this, Gear VR headset on. And then after about 3 hours, I took it off. I went, oh my God, I'm back in my office. And anyone might have walked past and had a good laugh at this guy with this headset on, looking around, etc.
Yes, yeah.
And from that experience, I think it's very easy to get a sense of presence and immersion. If you add what you were doing, which is also the auditory and also really the kinesthetic level to that.
It's the kinesthetic level, I think, too, because, for example, on the first day, my body was positioned on a plinth, partly to separate me from people and the wiring and all that sort of stuff. If there was no plinth, people might have gotten too close or tripped over wires. But it did isolate me on a plinth about 30 centimetres high. Yeah. And on the first day, unknowingly, I sort of gradually got close to the edge, to the point where one of the gallery attendants had to kind of grab me and kind of pull me back towards the centre. After the first day, I was kind of more conscious of my bodily position, but the first day I drifted, completely unaware of where I was locally. So it was an interesting experience in that respect, but it was an idea that I had spoken about for many years, actually, because I was always speaking about the idea that in the future, you might be able to see with the eyes of someone elsewhere, and in other words, your senses could be outsourced to people in other places, and then with the Pika performance and the funding from the Arts Council, WA Arts Council, I was able to finally realise it in a performance rather than just speaking about it as an idea. Because also as a performance artist, what's important is not just to have an idea, but to try to actualise the idea, to try to experience it personally, and thereby have something to be able to articulate later.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask about in terms of that is that there is also, I've been to one of your performances, which was the Stickman performance earlier this year, and what occurred to me was the aesthetic level, that it's not just working through these ideas at a technological level and in terms of your experience and your performance, but also there is an aesthetic that is important, I think.
Undoubtedly. I mean, essentially, you're looking at a performance artist. Yes, you're using state-of-the-art technologies for the time, but that in itself is not enough. And I mean that's the problem, I think, with any media art or interactive artwork, or that paradigm of sci art. Is that we need to be cognizant of the fact that it's not enough to be seduced by new technologies. What's important is what you do with them conceptually and aesthetically. So there certainly is an aesthetic element in all of these projects and performances, but it's an aesthetics that is generated by the performance and the technologies in themselves. It's not a kind of an aesthetic or a stylistic approach that I would necessarily take. So if I use a new technology, it's probably going to generate an alternate sort of an aesthetic. So,
that's what I've noticed. It's as though you're allowing the formal qualities of the technology to actually lead you to the particular aesthetic that you go for. Tell us a little bit about the Stickman project, which
Yeah,
It's a fairly recent.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Can you first follow me in here? Because the reason why Stickman occurs is this structure here. And when I did the performance attached to the industrial robot arm, we needed to have some sort of simple support for the body, because my body was attached. It had to be attached rigidly because you were being kind of thrown around by the industrial robot arm. And then when I saw the video of this performance and saw the back view, this is attached so I can't turn it around, but the back view of this support structure was this simple stick-like structure. And to me, it was very seductive, this linear support for the body. And then I sort of thought, well, hey, this could be a minimal full body exoskeleton.
Yeah.
And in fact, after the choreography of the body on this industrial robot arm, we attached a life-scale ear, which was...
So it's exactly your height,
Yeah, and in fact it was a scan from my ear.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the robot that choreographs the ear is the same robot that carves the ear, because the robot effectively is a 6 degree of freedom CNC machine. So that was the performance, in fact, that led to Stickman. So
and this was about 2015.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain institutional constraints being in a university, but hey, like I've been able to do at least three very important performances that are new performances, and they've been done whilst I've been here. And the other thing, when I was running the alternate anatomies lab for the first 2 years, we developed in collaboration with mechanical engineering and a PhD student, we developed a design where we could 3D print a hand exoskeleton with all its articulations. All you had to do was attach linear actuators. So this full hand exoskeleton, 3D printed literally overnight, could either be used for animating a paralyzed hand, or it could be used as a controller for a remote robotic manipulator. And we even got a patent for that. So that's a fourth very significant project in the time that I've been here. So it's been a very valuable association, I think. Stickman, yes, was something that came from the Propel performance, but it's a simple full body exoskeleton. Once you're strapped in, 2 arms and 1 leg enable you to algorithmically actuate and animate the body. And what we're doing now, though, which is going to add another layer of interactivity with a small soda grant, was this idea of imagine engineering a mini Stickman, which has already begun, a mini Stickman. So instead of having a touchscreen interface to the exoskeleton arm, here you would have a haptic interface to Stickman. So a visitor could walk up to the mini Stickman, press record, move its limbs, press play, and then the body exoskeleton, possibly with the artist attached, or without the artist, it would make an interesting installation in itself. And
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen in Enschede in the Netherlands next year in the performance.
Will the miniature version be in the same room, or will it be remote?
It could be remote.
It could,
but in this case, it would be more interesting to be
I
proximal.
agree, yeah.
Having said that, there'll be a 3D model on the internet of the mini Stickman or of Stickman that you can interface, because we obviously had both a local touchscreen interface for the exoskeleton arm, but we also had an internet interface where we had a 3D model of the exoskeleton arm that if you weren't at Pika or you weren't at Chrissy Parrott's studio or whatever, you could still access it remotely and actuate it that way.
It's interesting, the idea of having the general public put input into your movements, because in a sense, particularly because you're using the internet, it's as though you're crowdsourcing part of the authorship of the performance.
Well, in a way, the performance, and even with Fractal Flesh in 1995, I did nothing, my body didn't move until someone with the touchscreen interface, say at the Pompidou Centre or in Amsterdam, or accessed my body, programmed it to move, and then my body moved. But the performance, in a sense, was only fully realised with audience interaction. Yeah. I mean, I've never necessarily been one for interactive installations, but there has been a history of several that involved either people or internet data. So ping body, we use the ping protocol for the duration of the performance, pinged 40 global locations. Yeah. The reverberating ping back to the host computer was measured literally in milliseconds, and then depending on whether there was a lot of internet activity, say in the US, or minimal internet activity at the time, say in China, would determine whether my body moved a little or whether my body was more animated.
So you get a longer ping if it was active, for instance, if the internet was very active. It would take long, because then the packets take much longer to get
back. Yeah, so that was a kind of a gesture towards the body being driven purely by data streams, in this case using the ping protocol. But we did also do, for Parasite, we customized a search engine, and the search engine sort of scans the internet, selects images from the net, typically anatomical images of the body, displays them to my headset. It's the images that I see that are the images that move my body. Yeah. In other words, the complexity of those JPEGs were analysed, and depending on how complex, detailed, how large the file was and so on, simple parameters, but again, the idea that a customised search engine in this case was able to animate your body, was able to move. I mean, in a sense, it's a metaphor for what happens. I see you, you smile at me, it makes me smile. I mean, depending on how phenomenological you want to get in terms of your interface with the world, it's images that are constantly animating my body. So those performances explored this idea of partly being a performing body, using your own agency, but also partly being a possessed body, being choreographed by people in other places or by data streams coming from elsewhere.
Do you think there's an element of randomness, or at the very least in putting the input into your movements in the hands of other people's agency. Do you think that there is something in that allows you to take a break in a way from some of the decisions that you make?
Well, in a way.
Not that you're being lazy, of course, because I've seen you work, and it's also a lot of physical hard work. But yeah,
I think it's more the idea that you complicate what you mean by agency.
That's true.
And you, in a sense, reconfigure a body not as a bounded body functioning only in a local space proximal to others, but rather a body that might be distributed, that might be accessed, whose senses are outsourced.
So essentially what you're doing really across all of these is finding the edges, and really, I suppose, finding the blurred edges between, as you were saying, your phenomenological existence, your embodied existence within the world, and where that then becomes problematized by technology.
Yeah, because obviously we're interfaced increasingly more with our instruments and machines, and cognitively amplified by our computational systems.